Glad to be with you here again on a Thursday night, and we're wrapping up our CHECKMATE series, which is just a 3-week thing that we looked at dating here. Let's see, there we go. That's good. We're moving forward. Hey, and you can't talk about dating without kind of talking about a wedding. And so I was thinking here, just not too terribly long ago, but you might imagine that with what I do here and the demographic that I serve, that I probably get to do a wedding or two. And so during one of these weddings, there's all this commotion that's going around it, but wedding days are always just beautiful. They just really are. It doesn't matter if it's inside, it doesn't matter if it's outside. It's just really just a stunning thing, and it always seems like it's a miracle, like there's panic and chaos. And so the panic and chaos it's time. And so in comes the wedding processional, and here they all come in. And we're all standing waiting for the moment for the bride. And I love that moment because I have the best seat in the house. I'm right next to the groom, right? And I'm looking right down the aisle. And a lot of times where the doors will open up and the bride is coming down, and she's always beaming, right? And like there's just such great joy and such great love. Like I can't believe, you can just see the expression, I can't believe that this day is finally here and I get to be wed to him. And I know they're not looking at me, but I get like some of the aftershock of that. I'm like, this is just great. I just feel good about myself. And I love it because I also I have a great view, even though it seems like at the back of the head, I can usually see the side of the face of the groom and just to see what kind of response that they're going to have. And this was the most unique response ever at a wedding. So picture it. Here she is coming down. And I'm basking in all the glowing. And I look over, and he actually breaks eye contact with her, and he looks at me. And he says this. He leans over and he goes, I guess she'll do. And he goes, have I told you how boring she is? It's so painful to even just be around her. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, what am I supposed to do? Now, this is a fake story, okay? But I tell you that to tell you this. I think that there's many of us, or at least one of us probably in this room, that thinks that if I follow God fully, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to either be forever single or I'm going to marry somebody who is churchy best. You know, they're not really the best, they're churchy best. They're plain, they're ordinary, they're not very exciting to me. Dudley Magoo. You know, like that's our fear. And we sit there, we would never say this here, but we really begin to think if I were really, truly to trust God and follow him and surrender my relationships with him, all he's going to do is he's going to lead me to something lesser than. He's going to lead me to somebody who's just boring, and it's just going to be uneventful, and it's going to be a lame life. Therefore, I am not going to trust him. I'll sit through things, I'll think that's interesting, but I'm not going to change any of my habits. I'm going to continue to do my own thing because God is holding out on me. Okay, we would never say that here, but that's the oldest trick in the book of the enemy. Back in Genesis chapter 3, of course, you know this. What does Satan do? He says, man, has God given you any restrictions? Not to eat of the fruit. Well, because he's holding out on you. There's something greater, don't fall, Todd. There's something greater for you, but he's keeping it from you. He doesn't have your best interest at heart. He loves to see you suffer. And when you begin to believe that about God, it is only natural to rebel against what he has to say, to refuse to submit and follow him because you don't believe that he is good. You don't believe that he is generous. And you don't believe that he actually has your best interest at heart. And you know what? Talking about relationships, how to single well, how to select well. That's fine, Todd. Somebody who loves the Lord, equally yoked. That wasn't as sexy as what I was really hoping for. So I'm going to do my own thing. And what this does is it begins to reveal actually a deeper issue. You struggle with knowing and believing and trusting that God truly is good, that he is truly generous, and he truly has your best interest at heart. And that's the deeper stuff. The single this and search this and select this, that doesn't matter. I would so much rather you settle this issue. Is God good? Is God generous? Does God really have your best interest? Because if you settle that, everything else in life begins to just be radically transformed. And I can tell you a resounding yes, he does have your best interest. He is good. He's incredibly generous. And how do I know this? Because he took his most valuable thing, his son, and he sent his son. He gave his son to suffer a brutal death, a death that I deserved and that you deserved, to bring us back into a relationship with him. And you know what? You don't send your most valuable possession, your most valuable thing for, no. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and his only son, that whoever would believe in him, they would not perish but have eternal life. He loves you. He is good. He has great things for you. He has your best interest at his heart in all that he does. And I hope and I pray that if you're sitting here going, whatever, Todd, if you've struggled with that, specifically with relationships, that you would go ahead and allow God to do the deeper work. Even as we talk about some practical things tonight, I pray that if what you need to do the rest of the evening is just check out to what I'm saying and just sit there and wrestle with God, I really don't believe that you're good. I mean, you're good for some people, but you're not. I struggle with you being good for me. I really struggle with you being generous. I don't see that generosity. God, and you're for my best. I really struggle with that. And as you struggle with that, and as you wrestle with that, don't forget truth. Just come back to, really? He gave you everything. He's giving you everything you need for life and godliness. Settle that so that you can single well, so that you can actually live well, and that you could eventually relate well and maybe someday marry well. Because he does have great things for you. It may not be marriage. It may not be. But here's the deal. He's big enough and great enough and lovely enough to sustain you, and not just like, but to thrive during that when we settle. Is he good? Is he generous? Does he have my best interest? Now, that being said, we are going to just move on to a little practical thing. We've been talking about singling well, and we talked about selecting well, and now we're going to talk about the search. How do we search well? And we're going to be in the probably the most direct pursuit of God in a relationship story in all of Scripture, because there's only one that I can find here that's very directly related to searching out well, and that's found in Genesis chapter 24, and it's about this guy named Isaac and this girl named Rebecca. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with who Isaac is, his dad is Abraham, and that's important for you to know, because Isaac, we're not going to really see him until the very end of the story. Abraham, God said, hey, come out of your land, come to this new land that I have for you. I'm going to give you a bunch of descendants. Everybody's going to be blessed through you. And so Abraham left his comfort and came to an entirely new land and trusted God, and God said, this is the land, this is the place, this is where the blessing's going to unfold. And so Abraham, he staked his claim on that. Now, he and his wife, they didn't have any children, and they just waited and waited and waited. Descendants, he didn't have any. Waited and waited and waited and waited. And eventually, there were some mistakes that were made along the way, but eventually there was the promised one showed up. His name was Isaac, the promised offspring. Isaac is now about 40 years old. His mother, he's lost his mother 3 years, about 3 years before this, his mother passes away. And so he's living in this land in Canaan, surrounded by a bunch of people who don't follow his God, who don't understand where Abraham and his family are coming from. They don't honor the same God. Talk about trying to find somebody to be yoked well with. I mean, lonely. And so that's where we step into the story. And we're going to see the father, this very good and very loving and very generous father, initiate the pursuit for a spouse for his son. And now our world doesn't necessarily work that way. Our culture here does not work that way. It does in other parts of the world. But right now what we can pull from that is here is what a good, loving father who desires great things for his offspring, what that searching process, what dating actually looks like. And we're going to see that there's actually three words we're going to kind of hone in on because we need to define this word dating maybe in a new way for us to really understand where are we going, what are we doing with dating. And the three words are going to be honor, and it's going to be evaluate, and it's going to be to encourage. And so with that, this definition of dating here, I shorten it up here. Dating is just a way to honor God, to evaluate for marriage, and encourage others. Like, what is dating? Newsflash, it's not really just about you. It's really an opportunity to honor God. And also, dating is an evaluation. You are looking to see, are we on the same page? Are we heading the same direction? And then also to encourage one another. So we're going to make those three stops tonight. Honor, evaluate, encourage. We're going to look at that, how it shows up in the text. So first stop is honor. Here in Genesis chapter 24, verse 6. Let me back up before we read this one here, because it's really weird. It just is. So in 24, verse 1, it says, "Now Abraham was old and advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned." So this is a dude he highly trusts. And this is where it gets really weird. "Please place your hand under my thigh. And I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, the God of earth, and you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you will go to my country, to my relatives, and take a wife for my son Isaac." And then the servant asked this question. He says, what if the woman's not going to come? Well, let's just come back to the thigh thing because you're probably still thinking about it. So he's making him swear an oath. It's not uncommon in the ancient Near East to hang on to something of great value that you put your hand on. The Bible right now to swear and take an oath, it's not uncommon at that time. It was the most valuable thing, the most strongest oath that Abraham could think of, the promise that God had given him. And so he's touching some parts that aren't normally touched in the thing. And so he's making him swear the strongest possible oath possible. Impossible. How many possibles are there? And as weird as that sounds, I don't want you to miss that. This is the strongest oath. It's so vitally important to me that the woman that you're going to find to be the spouse of my son, whatever, do not take them from among here. Find one from my relatives, from my kind, somebody who is at least acquainted with the God that we follow because they know the story of me, not among the people who are here are worshiping other gods. I want you to find somebody who is evenly yoked, is what you can see going on here. So the servant says, well, what if she won't come back? Should I take Isaac back to your land so that he can live there? And now Abraham, remember, he had the promise, this is the land. This is the land. And Abraham's like, no way. I'm going to honor God all the way throughout this. So he says, be careful never to take my son back there. Abraham told him, the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and the land of my relatives, promised me with a solemn oath, to your descendants I will give this land. And Abraham is going, he has said it. I believe it. I will honor him with all that I have. We're not leaving this land no matter what. And then he says, if the woman won't come, you're released from the oath. But it's okay because an angel of the Lord is going to go ahead of you. Your way's going to prosper. I just know it. So off he goes. He's looking to honor God above all else in this process. And I was just thinking about that a little bit. So many times when we think about dating, it's about me, right? Does she look like I think she should look? Does he dress like the way that I think he should dress? Does he do this? Does he have the job that I think he should have? Would our kids look would our features match up well that our kids would be beautiful? Is their humor really my humor? Are their interests just totally my interest? We begin to think all about me, myself, and I, as opposed to looking, like we talked about last week, of chasing character over the cover. We honor God by saying, you know what? God, I'm going to trust that you're good. I'm going to trust that you're generous. I'm going to trust that you have my best interest. And therefore, I'm going to pursue for evenly yoked somebody who loves you in an incredible way. Somebody whose life is marked by the fruit of the Spirit. Somebody who will rejoice in speaking truth. That's what I'm going to aim for. And your naysayer friends will be like, oh, well, what if they don't look the way you want them to look? And you're going to be like, I just trust that he's good, and so I'm going to run after this. I'm going to trust him here, that he's going to take care of everything else. We're honoring God in the pursuit. Well, let's move on here. As we do here, the second point is now dating, it's an evaluation. You got to understand this. Your first date does not mean you're getting married. Your third date does not mean you're getting married. It is an entire process. Even getting engaged doesn't mean that you're getting married. You need to understand that dating is a process to see, are we compatible? And we want to make sure that we evaluate that well. Are we compatible to honor God? And when we understand that it's not about me, it's about honoring him, when we understand it's about a selection process, an evaluation process, it may sound kind of cold-hearted, it may sound kind of mechanical, but all of a sudden there's some freedom there. It's not so disappointing when a relationship doesn't work because you realize that evaluation requires both people in the process. And if it's not right, better to find out this side of I do than the other, because you don't want to be the first one that you're walking down the aisle or you're standing there and the bride's coming down and she's looking like, I guess he'll do. So let's look, how do we evaluate well that would honor God? Well, the first thing here is, again, character. We're chasing character over the cover. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I want you to notice this, that the servant is charged with just make sure that she comes from our people, our relatives, because at least they have a chance to have heard about our God and about the great things he's done in my life. Like, at least there's a chance that there's going to be some potential for evil and yokeness here. And so the servant says, let's just add to that maybe. Let's just think about this. And so he's going and he prays. He grabs some camels and he comes up, and it's really pretty funny. He gets all the camels and the servants together, and he comes to the well. And he has the camels kneel down towards the end of the day, so he's at the right place, because this is where the unattached women come to get water. That's just what they do, and this is the right time, the proper time when women who are functioning well, and they're not just totally making a hot mess of their lives, they all come together, and so there's a lot of options that are going to be happening here around the well. So the servant puts himself at the right place at the right time. And as he's sitting there, he begins to pray, and he's like, God, man, I just pray that the one that you have chosen, I even love that. Not the one that I'm choosing. You're the one who's leading this entire process, and I trust you, God. The one that you will choose for your servant Isaac. I'm going to ask for a drink of water, and I'm going to pray that I'm going to know their response is going to be drink. They're actually going to respond nicely. They're going to have hospitality, generosity, and kindness. They're going to say, oh, drink? Of course. They're not going to say, the well's right there. Get it yourself. Why are you asking me? No, instead they're going to respond and have this characteristic of just love and generosity. But not just a little, but really a lot, because would they not just say, yeah, I've got a drink for you, but then, oh, wow, you have some camels. Let me water them too. Let me be observant and see that there are other needs around here that I actually could meet. And let me go ahead and give some water for your camels. And so he's saying, I want for Isaac, not just somebody from the same people group, but I want somebody who's going to hospitality, who is kind, who is humble, who is generous, who is hardworking. Like, he's looking at character. He doesn't say, let the one be the smoking hot girl who's coming down, checking her socials. That's not what he's praying for. He's totally about the character. We've talked about that, and the reason I put it up here is not just so you can see it's in the Bible, but I put it up here as well as when we begin to evaluate, that doesn't just happen with the initial, do you want to go out, yes or no, and you're looking at character only then. No, over the entire process, as you date, you need to have keen eyes, wide open to be seen. Is there character here? You need to be paying attention to how are they talking, to a waiter or a waitress. How do they treat those that seem like they're in a position that's less than them, which is not less than them, but how do they treat people who are serving them? Were they initially really excited to come to Christian things with you, and then after like a month, it's really hard to get them to move into anything? That might tell you about where their heart really is. Were you guys joyfully serving together like that? That's where you met, and then the next thing you know, it's really difficult to go and serve. Like now you're just serving by yourself over and over again. You want to have your eyes wide open because you're looking, is that character, is it consistent? Are they truthful on big and small things? When they're sharing what's going on at work, and they sit there and said, well, I was kind of in trouble, but I knew that I could go ahead and blame the guy that wasn't there who's getting fired anyway. So I went ahead and just blamed the guy at work because they're going to get fired anyway. Whew, I was able to get out of that. Wow, that's a person of integrity. You're chasing the character not just at the initial I do, but all the way through. Chase character, not the cover. We already know that whole message. Go back, listen to last week's. Well, the next thing here is I just want you to see there's community involved. So here he is. He prays, and he's like, Lord, let this be the woman who comes in that she'll say, yeah, okay, drink and let me get some for your camels. And then the scripture tells us that even before he finished praying in his heart, so nobody else knows this, even before, he's like, oh, here is Rebecca coming down. And he moves quickly and says, hey, would you give me a drink? And she's like, yeah, and things go crazy. And look, you got camels. And so can I water your camels? He's like, oh my goodness, could this be? And so excitement begins to build in this story. As you read it, there's just this excitement that's overflowing. And it's interesting. The young woman doesn't continue to engage forever. She pulls away, and what does she do here in 28? The young woman, Rebecca, she ran and told her mother's household all about the things that are unfolding. She had community around her. It's so vitally important that you, when you're in a dating relationship, that you date in community. You need to have people around you who are asking you really hard questions. They need to be asking you, how are your physical boundaries? What are your physical boundaries? Hey, I've noticed that she has stopped coming to things with other people. Like she has just shut everybody off in her life except for you. Are you aware of that? You need to have people who are going to love you well enough to ask you those hard questions. And you need to have them around you now. You can't wait to try to find that community until you're in a relationship and you're like, well, I'm supposed to have community. Eeny, meeny, miny. Will you ask me some hard questions? And you're like, I don't even know you. So part of singling well, we want to build community really, really well, where there's people that we know and trust that overlap with our lives here and now. I understand that many of you, your people aren't here. They might be back at home. They don't get to observe, then if you're dating somebody here, they don't get to observe what that looks like. You need to make sure that you have community where you are, people, again, that are going to be moving towards you in beautiful ways. And you know, one of the things when I came up to meet Aaron for the first time, that was one of the things I was just like, okay, this Aaron girl, she's amazing on paper. Well, actually, there was no paper involved. It was all computer stuff going back and on the phone and on the Skype and on the FaceTime and in the text. She's amazing on these other places. But what stood out to me when we walked through the doors of this church, right here, right out there, we walked in on Sunday, and all of these people who moved towards Aaron, all of them who knew Aaron. Of course, they're trying to protect Aaron from weird guy from Santiago as well. But instead of being threatened by that, the reality was this. I'm like, people who love well are loved well. And Erin was loved very well. Therefore, she's a woman who loves well. She had a community around her. I would send her emails, and I don't think all of them, but some of the time she would sit there with her closest friends, and she would say, hey, look at what he wrote. Like, is this just too good to be true? Is he just like, does this make sense? She was looking for counsel. She wasn't operating in isolation. We need to have community around. If you want to evaluate, if you want to search well, you need to have community. Now, why I'm harping on community just for one more brief moment here, I want us to think about this as well. It's not just that you have community around you, but sometimes this is a danger that I've noticed. People are like, hi, and they're like, oh, hi, and you're cute. And, oh, really? Oh, and then we should go out sometime? Oh, girl, you're right. And so, whoo, they go out, and they're having a great time together, right? And then you know what? We never see them. They just begin to operate in isolation. They remove themselves from community, and danger, 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 warning, warning, warning. If you know somebody in a relationship and they drop off, you need to be asking some hard questions. When all of a sudden this attitude of us versus them, oh man, baby, your friends, they just don't like me. I always feel like they look at me with just judgmental eyes. How about you just go? What should be going through your mind is, why don't my friends like you? Why are my friends judging you? Because they're probably seeing something that I'm missing because you've got sweet biceps. Moving away into isolation, nothing good happens. And so I encourage you, if you begin in a relationship and whoever it is who begins to initiate moving further and further, baby, you're my anchor. Baby, you're all that I need. Baby, there's always people around. I just need time with you. Can we just Netflix and chill? Moving further and further away, as hard as it may be, encourage you to stand up and be like, there's something wrong. Address it. Community is important in the selection process. You know, Proverbs actually talks about that in 13:20, right? He who walks with the wise will become wise, but he who runs around with fools will suffer harm. Next thing is control. I think this is amazing, and it's kind of hard to see when you're reading in the text. So he gets done, would give me a drink, and okay, drink, and here's your camels, and then tell me who you are, and she explains who she is, and she's like, not only is she a relative, she's a close relative. Like, this is Yahtzee. Like, God, you are so good, and he's so excited. He's like, here's a hunk of gold for your nose. Boof. Here's some bracelets. Boof. Now, tell me, where you live, is there space for us to lodge? Basically, can we come to your house and hang out and meet the rest? And her response, she said, well, we have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in. And then she scampers off. It sounds almost like if as you're reading, like, oh, she's inviting him, but she's not. She's simply honoring him by answering his question, but she knows, I can't just have an impulsive reaction. I don't own the house. I need to slow down. Slowing down, she takes off sprinting back home to tell everybody. And just so you know, gentlemen, that happens. And ladies, it happens with dudes too. You might have a date and you come back and you drop her off or whatever else is going on there, but they gather and they begin to talk about all things. That's healthy. Don't be annoyed by it. It's healthy. Just know it happens. And so also then know that it's wise to engage with the friends so that they're like, I just don't know about him. He never talks to me. He does not talk to me for the last 3 weeks, and he's taken you out 6 times. Who does he think? Just know that's going to happen. They're going to talk about you all the time. So what you think is done in isolation, if they're in good community, it's not. It's going to be public knowledge in some ways. But just look here. There's control. As opposed to yeah, we do. Come on, let's just do it because I'm excited. You're excited. There's some gold. I'm like, this is going to be so cool. There's restraint. There's self-control. When you're walking through the evaluation process, when you're dating somebody, is there self-control being exhibited? There's a lot of areas where you can see this, but really, let's just look quickly, if we can, at the whole idea of physical. We get asked this. I get asked this a lot of times because let's just here. Reality is that in this demographic, there's a lot of people who struggle with pornography. And there's a lot of times that people will say, so this guy asked me out, and I've gotten to know him, and we've been dating for a bit, but he struggles with pornography. Is it okay for me to continue to date him? To which we say, depends. Is he really struggling? Is he really resisting, or just say, I just struggle with pornography and just gives in all the time? There's massive difference. But if that continues and on and on and on, I just would encourage you to have your eyes wide open and go, is there self-control being exhibited? It may be the right person, just the wrong time. Then comes the really hard thing, can you exhibit some self-control? Because you're like, everything else is perfect. But can you step back and maybe have a harder conversation? Again, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying we get asked that a lot on our responses. Are they actually struggling? Are they seeing victory? Yeah, and instead of like checking out porn 60 times a week, they're down to 58. It's probably not a whole lot of victory. Probably not a whole lot of self-control. They probably have some room for growth. And really wise to give them the time and space to grow. But not just there. We all know, like, hey. We all know, like, we should just know if there's sparks. Like, we just need to know. Like, is there really some physical attraction? Like, if you cannot figure out if there's physical attraction, just by like being next to the person, there's something a little bit wrong. And then like, if you're like, ooh, I held her hand, ooh, you can tell. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I won't go off there. It was probably like about 12 rows back in this section, and we were in, and I was up visiting her, and we had committed that before we came up, I was like, I just want to let you know, we will not kiss. I will not kiss you. Because I really want to have a clear mind. I just really want to make sure we're evaluating each other perfectly. And what that did was awesome. It gave her an opportunity to see, does he have any self-control? It gave me an opportunity, will she honor that? But I can tell you, we're 12 rows back, and we're singing the worship songs, and we're like, oh, our arms just touched. That's all the more I needed. I knew there was electricity going on there, right? Amen. So, there we go. Wow, so good. I figured anything should get that, right? Okay. So, but then, here's a lot of times what happens within the church. They say, okay, physical with relationships, just don't have sex. That was the great thing that we were given. And there's a great ministry called Merge out of Watermark up in Dallas, and this is for seriously dating couples and engaged couples. And so what they do is they list out kind of this scale from 1 to 9 of a whole bunch of a progression of physical intimacy. And so again, keep this in mind that this list, it's a little bit more specific than just don't have sex. Like there's some things that happen in between there. This is for seriously dating couples, and this is for engaged couples. Do you know where the encouraged line is? Right there. See, a lot of us, we have this idea that, we're dating now, I have more rights to her or his body. That's a lie. But we're really, really dating now. I have more rights, we can do more things because we just have to be more sure. Lie. I'm not saying you have to say that is level 3, is where you're going to hold. I think there's some great wisdom. In Merge, let me just tell you, it's not a small ministry, it's a massive one. There's a lot of great success stories coming out of there, marriages that are thriving, relationships that actually end. But this is restraint. Do you know what your boundaries are? I love asking guys, hey man, you're dating so-and-so, what are your physical boundaries? How are the physical boundaries going? They're great. And they're hoping that I'll just leave it at that. They're great. 9 all the way. They don't say that, but then you ask the question, what are they? And I love asking that with somebody if I'm meeting with a couple different guys at the same time, because the other guys are like, what are you doing, Todd? Whoa, you get to watch the uncomfortableness on their face. But I love them, and I got to know, where are you going? Are you operating with wisdom or stupidity? Are you presenting an opportunity to love and honor and respect the other person or not? Because when you have a conversation, a direct conversation, and I got to move here, but as you have these direct conversations, you got to understand those boundaries are simply opportunities to love one another. And if they will not respect the boundaries that have been set, now do you think they're going to respect the boundaries that are expected within marriage? What are they going to do on a business trip? Well, the boundaries of marriage is just, baby, I'll be faithful. I'm going to be gone for the next 2 weeks in the business trip and I'm lonely and you're far away. I mean, it's no big deal. Everybody's doing it. That's why we evaluate. If you can't be faithful with this, begin to think about it. Are they going to be faithful with more? This is huge. It's a very clear and easy boundary to set and a wonderful opportunity to test one another. Will they honor? Will you honor it? And if not, what does that tell you about character? If I've just stepped on your toes, I'm not sorry. I want you to evaluate well. Figure things out this side of I do as opposed to the other. There are other ways of where there's not control. There's emotional things. If you're dumping your entire life story with the abuse that you suffered at age 3 on your first coffee and you don't even know their name, like that's not healthy. If they're prying out and you're like, man, because this happens with relationship. Like it's supposed to, that's what happens going deeper. But instead, if your progression always is like, no, how does that make you feel? No, how to, and you try to force your way down here right away, man, there's not a whole lot of restraint. Tell you a story about that a later time. A clarity. Now here it is within communication. This is amazing. The servant is, so they come and they gather and say, here's the story, here's what went on. And the family's like, cool, do it. And so the servant's like, yes, this is amazing. Rebecca's going to come home. God has been so faithful. And they're like, just give us like 10 days. And he's like, no, we leave now. Like, whoa, you can't do that. And so he just asked this very direct question. Now, if you will show faithful love to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me as well so that I may go on my way. Very direct. Are you in? Are you out? I need to know so that I can keep moving. There's clarity in communication. Now, we're going to just do a few little things here so you can see what we mean, some practical things. Let's talk about asking somebody out. Are you clear? I got some people like, they're like, girl. What? It's like games and stuff, girl. What are you talking about? So here would be just, you want to be intentional, you want to be clear, and you want to be honest in your communication. Here's what it might look like. We've got Tina and Tim. So, yeah. Tina always makes me think of Napoleon Dynamite, right? The llama, like, eat your food, you fat lord. Oh. So, okay, Tina. Hey, Tina. I've really been amazed by how you respond and engage with people at our table. You're always so kind, encouraged, and thoughtful. I'd really like to get to know you more and was wondering if I could take you out on a date sometime. Ooh, Oh. Clear. Why are you asking me out? They're like, hey, I'd just like to take you out on a date sometime. Seriously, I say it every time I go through there. If a guy asks you out, girls, and says, hey, I'd like to take you out on a date, and they don't give you some preface of why, ask them, why? There's a lot of girls here. Why me? Oh, girl, No, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Oh, girl, just, you dress cute. Whatever it may be, ask them. Look at this, though. Chasing, this tells you right away, this person's interested in my character. And that should move you to say yes. Even maybe it's somebody that you're not initially attracted to at all. I mean, you might be sitting there going like, man, I would have never thought this. But I can go and explore to see where God is leading this. So she's going to be intentional, clear, and honest. Tim, you're so kind. I don't see all those things in me, but you're so kind. Sure. What are you thinking? Chai latte at Panera? Maybe a cinnamon crunch bagel? Huh? What are you thinking? For those of you who know me, know that's kind of a thing. So they go to Panera. They're like, yeah, that sounds great. So they go to Panera and they have a great time, maybe. So let's continue this whole evaluation thing. At the end, Tim's like, hey, Tina, I had a really great time learning more about you. I really did. Like, this is where I am. I'm being intentional. I'm talking with you. This was awesome. I really had a great time. Well, what are your thoughts about a dinner date on Tuesday? I had a great time, and I really want to take another step moving forward. Intentional, right? Direct and honest. Now you see a lot of text, so you're like, poor Tim. But we get asked this question a lot, like, how do you say no? Like, well, right here. Tim, thank you for the chai. It was really great getting to know more about you too. I really appreciate you asking me out. I do. It takes an incredible amount of courage to ask somebody out. I appreciate that. You're not laughing like, sincerely, I appreciate that. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to decline. I don't want just a free dinner. I don't want to sit there. Like, I know from this one time that It's apparent to me that you love the Lord, and man, you have great and beautiful ambitions. I just don't see us moving forward in a dating relationship. I know it's not what you hope to hear, but I wanted to respect you by being truthful. Will Tim be hurt by this? Yeah. Should Tim be resentful about this? No. Tim should be incredibly honored by this. That somebody would respect him and honor him enough to be that direct. Now, if Tim, I know we have some Tims here, it's not any of them, but if Tim were so to choose to be like, well, what do you mean? Let me try to convince you of why we should continue. What do you mean you don't see us moving forward? Tim, just want to let you know, you've just opened the door for her to continue her honesty. Well, Tim, I just want to let you know that when I came in, you didn't open the door to greet me or stand to greet me. You really just kind of like, hey, what's up, girl? And that just really kind of bothered me a little bit. It didn't really line up to what I saw before. And Tim, if I could continue, I watched you eat, and it went everywhere. Like, do you see it in my hair? Like, this is amazing. And as you ate the entire time, you didn't hear a word I said. You were just like, nom, 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 nom. Like, that's all you were doing, Tim. And Tim, while we're continuing here, I know that you have a great love for God. I really do believe that. But I see incredible immaturity in the ways that you have processed life decisions, the ones that you shared with me. And so, Tim, for those reasons, I'm out. That'd be my, the Shark Tank. There you go. So be respectful, Tim, he's not leading us in the same direction. Well, why not? Tim, get ready. It can work the other way as well. If you're really having to try to convince a person to continue to go out with you, you might want to just back off a bit. But if you just desperately need to know, get ready. And if you agree or don't agree, that doesn't really honestly matter. God's in control. If you're like, man, I really thought Tina was the one, but God, I trust you. And if so, you're going to lead us together. I'm going to continue to honor and respect her. He's in absolute control. So you're intentional, you're clear, and you're honest. And what that does is you continue through this process. This is where I stand. Where do you stand? Repeat. This is where I stand. Where do you stand? Repeat. I'd encourage even once you start dating on a regular basis with an individual, it's okay to have a weekly conversation. Man, this is where I stand. I'm still having a great time, and I'm more and more amazed by who you are, the ways that God uses you. I'm just so blown away. I would still love to pursue you. But what about you? I understand this takes two. Tim, it has been a great run, but okay. And there be hurt? Yes. But speak truth in love. Last thing here, because I really, really have to go fast, encourage. And if you really approach dating thinking, I want to honor God, I want to clearly evaluate, but I really want to encourage, build the other person up in their faith. You see it in the story. It's incredible. A few times the man does this. He just watches what unfolds in this woman's life. Rebecca's just being Rebecca. And it says this, the man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord. Like he just sits there and he's like, are you are you kidding me? This is incredible. You offered me a drink, and then for the camels? Like, God, you were so good. What do you guys think? You want to come? Isaac? Yeah. Oh, my goodness, you're so good. And Rebecca was just being Rebecca. That's what she was being. She was just being herself. And that was one of the greatest things. Back in my eHarmony days when I was in Santiago, Chile, I got matched with a lot of different people. And I found this very interesting. They would be like, what are you doing down there? I'm doing ministry work. And like, oh, okay, that's good, right? Because, well, you love Jesus and I love Jesus too. And so then what I found is so many women would try to do this. They're like, let me encourage you. Let me send you this podcast. Yeah, I'm going to be teaching, on John 1. Oh, there's a great sermon. Listen to this sermon. Oh, here's a great book. Here's a great article. Here's a great worship song. Okay, and that's fine. Can I tell you what I heard? I'm preaching on John 1. Well, here's a great sermon. So what I heard is, you stink at teaching. There's no way you could handle it on your own. Therefore, why don't you use this as a crutch? And yeah, that's some of my own baggage. They were trying to encourage me, but their trying wasn't having the result that they wanted. The beauty of Aaron was just Aaron. She was just loving God and loving people. And when we would talk, it would ooze from her. And what it did in me was, I want to love God more. I want to love people more. Just because she was being who she is. So instead of always sitting there going like, well, what's the greatest encouragement? And it's fine to give books, and it's fine to send links to podcasts or worship songs. Those are good things. But really the greatest encouragement is you pursue Christ incredibly well. You walk in step with him. And then next thing you know, it's no longer I who live, but it's Christ who lives in me. It's his life that's flowing out. And that life is all of a sudden very attractive for others who are walking that same direction, and encouragement happens. It's beautiful and it's amazing. As we engage in the dating process, keep that in mind. How can I encourage even Tim? How can I encourage him in his faith? I want you to notice this, the result. We can't miss this. So really the requirement's like just somebody from Abraham's people, give water to the servant and water for the camels. And if you go back and you look, how much more God gave. If I follow God, he's going to give me Dudley Magoo, somebody who's just ho-hum. It's going to be boring. Because God's not good, God's not generous, and God doesn't have my best intentions. I've never been to a wedding. Never been to a wedding where that's happened. Every wedding I've been at, as the bride comes down, she's beaming. Now look at the groom, and he's beaming or bawling or both. Never once are they like, oh, they're okay. Do you see how much more? She went quickly. Like, it's not like she gave him one. She's like, oh, yeah. And then it was like, okay, I see your camels. Can I water your camels too? He's like, yes, check. But she watered until they were full. She went even further. And oh, by the way, she was very beautiful. She had singled well. She was pure. She had shown great restraint. There was great faith there. Will you go? I'll go. This good, generous God who absolutely has the best in mind for us provided beautifully. And not just for Isaac. If you finish the story up, you see she's coming back and Isaac's in the field, just kind of hanging out, flowing hair. Afar, the caravan shows up and Rebecca's off her camel and she says, who is that? And the servant says, that's Isaac. He was generous to both of them. Finally, Danny, we talked about evaluation. Can I just come back to the very beginning? If there's any part of you that is just you're so reserved about trusting God with your relationships, I just want to encourage you at the heart level. Is it because you don't think that he's good? Is it because you don't think that he's generous? Is it because you don't think that he has your best interest at heart? I promise you, he does. Does that mean you'll be married? No. Does it mean that there'll be abundance in your life? Yes. We need that relationship intact so much more than any other. So as we wrap up, the band comes forward here. Just our challenge is this. I encourage you, we're going to break next week because it's Thanksgiving. You're going to have some time with your family. Thanksgiving, you have the opportunity to be thankful for things. I just want to encourage you, read Genesis 24. Read this for yourself. Stand in awe and sit there and go, is this story about the servant's faithfulness, Abraham's faithfulness? Is this about Isaac's faithfulness? Is this about who Rebecca is? Or stand in awe and go like, wow, in the first 61 verses, over 30 times we see the Lord or God being mentioned over and over and over and over. The fact that he is the one who is active. He is in control. The good, generous God who desires great things for his children is moving in great ways. Stand in awe of it. And then reflect, do you have any reservations trusting God with relationships? And if you do, it's okay. Answer it honestly. What is it? I'm Dudley Magoo. Why? Is that really who God is? Is he the one who just gives second best? Think about it. Are there any changes you'd like to make about how you approach dating? Maybe you would sit there and think, you know what? I'm not in a relationship now, but I really want to, this is where I'm putting my physical boundaries. And I'm going to have that conversation and be clear. Maybe you are in a relationship right now and you're like, man, we've been doing it wrong. We want to make adjustments. I want to give an opportunity. I want to approach whoever I'm in a relationship with. I want to confess that I haven't been honoring. I've pushed boundaries where I shouldn't have. You want to humble yourself and ask for forgiveness. And then you want to sit there and say, listen, you can trust me. Watch. Just watch. Christ in me is going to help me honor these limits, these boundaries. I want to love you this way. I want to tangibly show you how much I love you. And it's not by crossing the lines, but it's by keeping the lines. Just watch. Let me love you that way. If there's any changes, just dwell on them and be prepared. And then you know what? Share with at least one person. You don't build community by just sitting there as a bunch of individuals hiding behind masks, and you can have conversation with your mask on. You can reach out to people online. You can do that. You have to build community. That starts with sharing. You've got to initiate. You've got to move towards people. Otherwise, you're going to live in isolation, and that's no way to live. It's no way to engage in a relationship. There's danger, danger, danger. So every week, it's there. Every single week. I don't care how long you've been coming to Junction. That's the third thing. Always. And it's there because I desire so greatly for you to be in community that is beautiful, that is good, that is healthy. Because we need that. We need to be held accountable. We need to have checks and balances at times. We need to be known when we're running off a course. We need that. Can we be bold men and women who would engage and look to build that community? We do it well. Can we excel even more? Let's pray. God, thank you. I went on way too long, Lord, but it's because this topic is it's pretty big. It's pretty relevant in so many of our lives. It's a place where many have crashed and burned, if we're honest. But it's a place where your grace is sufficient. It's a place where you're not sitting there and heaping guilt and shame, but freedom and liberation and forgiveness, Lord. And so I pray this evening, if there's anybody here who's hung up over past failures and the enemy wants to continue to cast shame and doubt, Lord, would you crash through that wall and remind them that your grace is sufficient for them, that your power is made perfect in weakness, that you see them as clean, as pure, as beautiful. Lord, if there's others who are just struggling with thinking that you're really good, they're doubting that you're generous, and they don't really believe that you have their best interest, would you, Lord, engage with them in a way that they couldn't ignore? Lord, would they not be able to sleep? Would that question, one of those three questions, would it just rattle around their brain where they couldn't let it go? They couldn't get away from you. Lord, would you continue your reckless pursuit? It's not really reckless, it's intentional, but would you continue that pursuit? Would you have us be willing to stop and engage with you and be transformed by you? Father, we absolutely love you.